So, good morning, good day, BSE 3, and especially Ma'am Elardo, good morning. So, we are here to present the lesson 2, unit 1, which is performance assessment. What and why a performance assessment? So, for the overview of this topic, so some of the skills are best assessed with paper and pencil tests, but other skills, particularly those independent judgment, critical thinking, and decision making, are best assessed with performance testing. So here we go. Let's look on our learning objectives. So for the learning objectives, after successfully completing this module, the student is expected to design and develop performance tasks using the goal, role, audience, situation, products, standard, yung tinatawag nating GRASP model. So, una nating pag-uusapan ay what is performance assessment? So, performance assessment involves students taking part in skill-building activities rather than answering questions about how to perform those skills on paper. So, ang best lang para maintindihan nyo guys kung ano ba yung performance assessment ay from the word itself. So, you guys or the students will be able to perform his or her assessment especially from the teachers. So, yung teacher, yung magbibigay ng assessment sa mga bata. So, instead of using test and paper, o yung tinatawag na nating natatapos sa isang upuan, yung mga gagamit ka ng mga exams, for example, you are a teacher, and then you give your students the attend quiz examination for them to assess them. So, otherwise, ibig sabihin ng performance assessment. Ikaw bilang teacher, iisipin mo, mag-a-assess ka ng student mo na ipa-perform nila. Yung, kumbaga, mabibuild nila yung skills nila in a way of performing their assessment. So, to continue the topic, so merong features of a performance assessment task. So, unang-una na dito yung real-world scenarios. Madali na lang nating maintindihan yung real-world scenarios. Pangalawa naman ay authentic and a complex process. Sunod ay higher order thinking. Especially yan talaga ang kailangan natin yung assessment na ibibigay natin sa mga bata bilang teacher ay, alam mo yun, nagtuturo sa mga bata para ma-develop yung kanilang HOTS o yung tinatawag na nating higher order thinking skills. And then yung last one, transparent evaluation criteria. Syempre, pag nagbibigay ka ng assessment sa mga bata, pag perform sila, kailangan ine-evaluate mo yun. You give some judgments for the assessment. So, performance assessment is a good opportunity for professors or for teachers, for instructors to personalize their courses. Yun yung mahalaga dun Bilang teacher, ikaw, pag nagpa-assess ka ng bata, especially this performance assessment, mapapersonalize mo yung subject na hawak mo. Ikaw yung mag-iisip kung ano ba yung paraan na papa-assess mo sa mga bata. For example, you assessed your students to do a role-playing. Diba? Malapit siya sa performance assessment kasi how will you going to do the role-playing without performing, without making a performance from it? So, doon pa lang sa paraan na yun, alam mo yun, ma-assess mo na yung bata at the same time, nagpa-perform sila. So, in other words, traditional assessment, answer the questions, do you know it? Tapos yung performance assessment naman, on the other hand, answer the question, how well can you use what you know? So the best explanation from this, ganito. Traditional assessment, ano ba yung alam ng estudyante? Then you will assess them. So imagine you are a teacher. Ano ba yung alam nila? And then you will assess them. That is the meaning of traditional assessment. Otherwise, in performance assessment, how well can you use what you know? Ano ba yung alam ng bata na magagamit nila to assess themselves doon sa subject or yung sa course mo bilang teacher, kung ano ba yung tinuturo mo, paano ba nila paano mo ba sila ma-assess? Siyempre, yung alam nila is ipa-perform nila. So next naman, or continuation lang to nung una, performance assessment is a task student must perform instead of then write the test. So BSE 3, madali na siyang maintindihan. Kasi pag performance assessment, di ba, yung kung ano yung sinabi ko kanina, the student must perform instead than write a test. Sunod naman nating pag-uusapan ay yung performance assessment define. Wala naman siyang kaibahan dun sa una nating pinag-usapan, pero dito siguro mas broad pa siya, mas complex pa yung pagbibigay ng definition of what performance assessment, 'di ba? So for example, a performance assessment built around a complex reasoning task such as problem solving or decision making so requires the synthesis of information. Performance assessment involves the demonstration and application of knowledge and skills and work habits through what is known as performance task. So, para mas ma-define natin kung ano pa yung performance assessment. Pag sinabi kasi natin performance assessment, ito yung kung paano ba yung teacher na-assess yung bata para ma-develop yung kanyang skills, ma-develop yung kanyang HOTS, yung higher order thinking skills, at the same time, na-develop yung kanyang knowledge, tsaka yung skills. So, dun sa ikaw bilang teacher, pag in-assess mo yung bata mo, kailangan makikita mo na dun sa sa pagpa-perform nila, makikita mo na talagang nag-a-apply sila ng knowledge. Yung tinatawag na nating application and demonstration of knowledge. At saka syempre yung skills. Ano ba yung mga kakayahan ng mga estudyante mo para ma-perform nila yung binibigay mong assessment para sa kanila. So magandang magandang pasimula para sa ating mga future educators, 'di ba? Ang sarap sa puso natin na malaman na ganito pala ang pure definition of performance assessment. Next naman is performance assessment can be used as a formative or summative tool. So, ayoko nang basahin kung ano ba yung definition of what is formative tool or summative tool. Gusto ko lang matandaan yun na kapag sinabi nating formative tool or formative assessment, you as a teacher, i-guide mo or i-instruct mo yung mga bata para magawa nila or para ma-perform nila yung task na ginagawa mo. Otherwise, when we say summative tool, ito naman kapag ginaid mo at in-instruct mo yung mga bata, may kasama ng rubrics or judgment doon sa pag-a-assess mo sa mga bata. Yun lang naman yung mas complex at broad na definition of what is a performance assessment. So BSE 3 for the last topic that I will discuss, okay, for this time is the construction of performance assessment. So, lagi nating tatandaan, BSE 3, na kapag nagbibigay ka ng performance assessment sa mga bata, kapag kayo ay naging teacher na, kailangan yung assessment na binibigay mo sa mga bata ay well organized. At the same time, may construction kasing performance assessment. Hindi ka lang basta nagbibigay ng assessment sa kanila. So, before constructing a performance assessment, think about what students will need to become, proficient in the domain or discipline that you are teaching as a teacher. Consider these questions before constructing the task. So, may mga tatlo tayong questions na kailangan tandaan kapag nagbigay tayo ng assessment sa mga bata. Unang-una ay, what essential questions are guiding your instruction and assessment? Madali lang siya maintindihan, di ba? Sabi dito, ano ba yung mga mahalagang tanong na mag-guide dun sa instruction at saka dun sa assessment na ginagawa mo? Pangalawa naman, how much time will you allow students to complete the task, knowing that all students do not work or learn at the same pace? Ibig sabihin, kapag nagbibigay ka ng assessment, may limitation of time. Di ba? May time bound. Kailangan, may due date kang ibibigay sa kanila. Hindi yung, okay, yung performance assessment na ibibigay ko sa inyo or yung assessment na ibibigay ko sa inyo ay hanggang, halimbawa ngayon ay, ngayon ay May 3, tapos ang pasahan ay May 3, pero 2023 pa. Girl, 2 years yung nung due date ng performance assessment. Tapos na yung school year ng pagtuturo mo sa mga bata. Doon mo palang ipapasa. That is a bad idea. So, medyo exaggerated lang yung pag-explain ko, pero alam niyo yun, para mas maintindihan nating lahat na kapag nagko-construct tayo ng performance assessment, kailangan maganda yung construction, kailangan may limitations of due date. Hindi lang tayo basta. Syempre, para ma-develop din naman yung pagiging active ng mga bata. kapag ina-assess mo sila. So for the last one, for the last questions that you will able to consider in making or constructing a performance assessment ay yung what scenario from the real world will be meaningful and engaging for students. So kailangan yung performance assessment na ibinibigay mo sa bata. Ano ba yun? Nagre-reflect from the society or nagre-reflect for the globalizations of the world. Kung baga, kung ano ba yung nangyayari sa labas ng mundo natin, ang nagre-reflect dun sa mga assessment na ibinibigay mo sa kanila. Kailangan hindi ka lang naman bigay ng performance assessment, hindi ka lang dapat assess ng assess. At the same time, kailangan, pag nagko-construct ka ng performance assessment, alam mo yun, nagre-reflect from the reality. Ganun lang yun. Nagre-reflect, alam mo yun, sa katotohanan, yung mga ganun. Reflect nga from the reality. Inulit ko lang. So, ganun guys, pag sinabi nating performance assessment, alam mo yun, tulad na sinabi ko kanina, bago tayo proceed dun sa performance assessment defined or yung pinaka-complex tsaka pinag-broad na definition of performance assessment. When we say performance assessment, yung student must perform instead to write a test. Thank you so much.
So good day everyone. I'm going to discuss about the rigor and relevance. If the goal of performance assessment is to give students opportunities to apply their knowledge and skill to complex, real-world problems or tasks, it is important to ensure that the tasks you develop are both intellectually rigorous and relevant to students. So there are many ways to evaluate the rigor and relevance of a performance assessment you are designing. One method is the application model created by Dr. Willard R. Daggett of the International Center for Leadership in Education. His four-quadrant model allows teachers to plot where their assignments lie on an axis of rigor using Bloom's taxonomy and real-world relevance, moving from the simple and predictable to the complex and unpredictable. Daggett suggests that applying multifaceted interdisciplinary knowledge to real-world unpredictable situations shows the highest level at which students can demonstrate conceptual understanding. So the next one is process-oriented performance-based assessment. Assessment is not an end in itself, but a vehicle for educational improvement. Its effective process then begins with the enacts a visions of the kinds of learning we most value for students and strive to help them achieve. Assessment is most effective when it reflects an understanding of learning as multidimensional, integrated, and reveals performance over time. Learning is a complex process. It entails not only what students know, but what they know. It involves not only knowledge and abilities, but values, attitudes, and habits of mind that affect both academic success and performance beyond the classroom. Assessment should reflect these understandings by employing a diverse array of methods, including those that call for actual performance, using them over time so as to reveal change, growth, and increasing degrees of integration. Such an approach aims for a more complete and accurate picture of learning. Next one is the process-oriented learning competencies. It is information about outcomes of a high importance where students end up matters greatly. But to improve outcomes, we need to know about students' experience along the way, about the curricula, teaching, and the kind of student effort that lead to particular outcomes. Assessment can help us understand which students learn best under condition or under what conditions. With such knowledge comes the capacity to improve the whole of their learning. Process-oriented performance-based assessment is concerned with the actual task performance rather than the output or product of the activity. So it said that the process-oriented performance-based assessment is focusing more on the actual task performance. So the next one is the learning competencies. The learning objectives is the process-oriented performance-based assessment are stated in directly observable behaviors of the students. Competencies are defined as group of clusters of skills and abilities needed for a particular task. The objectives generally focus on those behaviors which exemplify a best practice for the particular task. Such behaviors range from a beginner or level up to the level of an expert. So from the beginner to an expert. An example of learning competencies for process-oriented performance-based assessments is reciting a poem. So the student should recite the poem from memory without referring to notes, use appropriate hand and body gestures in delivering the piece, maintain eye contact with the audience, and create ambience of a poem through appropriate rising and falling intonation. Pronounce the words clearly and with proper diction. Another is the example of competencies that are simple competencies. Speak with a modulate voice. Draw a straight line from one point to another point, or coloring a leaf with a green crayon, and so on and so forth. That's all. Thank you.
So, hi, I'm Alana Jean Enriquez, and I'm the last reporter of this group. So, let's go to task designing. So, learning tasks need to be carefully planned. So, here are some generally accepted standards for designing a task include. So, first, we need to identify an activity that would highlight the competencies to be evaluated. So, for the second one, we need to identify an activity that would entail more or less the same sets of competencies. If an activity would result into many possible competencies, then the teacher would have difficulty assessing the student's competency on the task. So for the last one, we need to find a task that would be interesting and enjoyable for the students. So move on to scoring rubrics. So a rubric is a scoring scale used to assess student performance along a task-specific set of criteria. So, authentic assessments typically are criterion reference measures. That is, a student's aptitude in a task is determined by matching the student's performance against a set of criteria to determine the degree to which the student's performance meets the criteria for the task. So, to measure the student performance against a predetermined and set of criteria, a rubric or scoring scale is typically created, which contains the essential criteria for the task and appropriate levels of performance for each criterion. Okay, so next is why include levels of performance. So let's go to the first one. So clear expectation. So having a clear expectation is good. So giving others the context and intention for them will make them clearer and easier to follow. So this is about justification to others. It is about helping people understand the bigger picture. So with this bigger picture, people will understand better and commit more easily. Okay. So next is more consistent and objective assessments. So, in addition to better communicating teacher expectations, level of performance permit the teacher to more consistently and objectively distinguish between good and bad performance or between superior and poor performance when evaluating student work. So, next is better feedback. So, furthermore, Identifying specific levels of student performance allows the teacher to provide more detailed feedback to the students, so the teacher and the student can more clearly recognize areas that needs improvement. So, let's go to analytic versus holistic rubrics. For a particular task you assign students, do you want to be able to assess how well the students perform on each criterion? So, or do you want to get a more global picture of the students' performance on the entire task? So, the answer to that question is likely to determine the type of rubric you choose to create or use. So, here is the analytic or holistic. So, let's go first to the analytic rubric. So, when we say analytic rubric, it articulates levels of performance for each criterion, so the teacher can assess student performance on each criterion. So, using the research rubric, a teacher could assess whether a student has done a poor, good, or excellent job for organization and distinguish that from how well the student did on a historical accuracy. So, while the holistic rubric it's a A holistic rubric does not list separate levels of performance for each criterion. Instead, a holistic rubric assigns levels of performance by assessing performance across multiple criteria as a whole. So that's all. Thank you.